Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it's very appropriate that this beautiful work of art by Tom Lee has been donated, very beautiful work by Dr. and Mrs. Gum, and that Paul Foster, the Western Refinery Corporation, have been very generous in terms of making a lot of this possible here, where we are today. And by the way, I want to tell you something. I not only have a background in history and anthropology, watch out, public health. I have a master's in public health from Berkeley, and I was a health educator. And much of that work as a health educator was really kind of community development, but I did do patient education and what have you. And that was mainly in Nevada and Eastern California and Southern Oregon. And, oh gosh, I forgot, Arizona as well. So I was all over. And I worked with the Indian Health Service, which was part of U.S. Public Health Service. But I decided to go on loan and get some international experience. And guess what? I went to Ecuador. And I thought, well, I won't be working with any more Native American communities. Well, I was really wrong, because most of the communities that I worked with, where we had, and I was staff, where we had Peace Corps volunteers, were up in the mountains. And guess who? They were all Quechua Indians. So I've worked with a lot of Native people. And it's interesting about Cabeza de Vaca. I don't know where to start on this, but I have 10 minutes, so don't let me go over. But anyway, when I was much younger, back in school, I read Relación, the book of the account that Cabeza de Vaca wrote about his experience 8 years in the so-called wilderness, all the way from Florida through Galveston, much of southern Texas, some of northern Mexico, and perhaps even the El Paso area, and then eventually ended up on the coast in Culiacan. How long did it take? 8 years. And how did they start? They started out in about 1527 with an expedition led by a fool. His name was Narvaez. He was not a very nice man. When he was in Cuba, and they were taking Cuba, he sat on his horse while he watched and laughed while they killed hundreds and hundreds of Native Americans. So he really enjoyed that. He was a terrible man. And he tried to get the jump on Cortez in Mexico. And he got into a battle with some of the Cortez's people, and he had his eye slashed. He became blind in one eye. But he was blind to begin with. He had no human qualities in terms of a relationship with human beings as people and what have you. He looked down on people. A very vicious person. And he, in 1526, from the king, became the head man of an expedition to conquer what? Florida. Can you imagine that? He had an ancestor in the year 1212. Can you imagine that? He was born in 1490. 1490, 2 years before Columbus set sail. He was born, okay? But he had an ancestor. And you know, the history of Spain is also the history of North Africa, particularly the Arab people, Moroccans and what have you, went into Spain a long time ago, were there for hundreds of years, and eventually Spain threw them out, resisted. But anyway, there was a lot of intermarriage and cultural exchange. And this guy by the name Alaja, now that has to be not a Spanish name, but a Moorish name, right? He was out herding cattle one day up in the Pyrenees, and he became aware that the Moorish army was going to come through this pass. And he was a little bit concerned about that. I guess he was on the side of the king of Spain at that time, or what little territory the king had. So he notified the king's troops that these Moors were going to, this Moorish army was coming through. And they said, well, how do we know where to find that pass? There's a lot of passes around here, Well, he said, don't worry, I'm going to put a head of a skull of a cow on a big rock, and you can't miss it. Well, okay, the army came through, they found the pass, and then they had ambushed the Moors and won. And as a result of this victory, the king decided he would award this poor peasant, Alaja, and give him a noble title, nobility, and his name became Alaja Cabeza de Vaca. That's kind of interesting. Okay, so Cabeza de Vaca grew up in, I don't know if you've been in southern Spain, but he's from the area Jerez de la Frontera, southern Spain, near the water there in the Mediterranean, close to Sanlúcar de Barrameda, which was the same port that Columbus exited on, and the same port that what's his name? The Spanish, gosh, I can't even think. Pizarro went. A lot of Spanish explorers and conquistadors used that port. It was a major port. And so he also grew up in Cadiz, the whole area right there in southern Spain. And when he was 10 years old, poor Columbus came back through his village in chains. Little did he know at 10 years old that in about 40-some years he would also come back in chains. And I'll explain that. But anyway, this Narvaez, this belligerent, not very friendly guy, got the award by the king to conquer Florida. So he needed a good bunch of soldiers. So he picked Cabeza de Vaca as his second in command, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. He was a young man, probably about 30 years old or so. He had been involved in a big battle, the Battle of Ravenna in Italy, to help the Pope out. This is, 13, 14 years before that. And guess what? 20,000 people were killed in that battle. Now that may be, as a result of that, even though he was trained as a soldier, he might have had some medical experience. 20,000 people killed in a battle, that's possible, okay? And then one of the other guys on that group was a guy by the name of Andres Durantes. And he was from a poor family of nobility. His sister fortunately became the mistress of the Duke of Bejar in Seville. And actually, a couple months ago, my wife and I visited the Duke's Palace. It's now a rather, how do I say it, beautiful resort area for people at $300 or $400 a night. We didn't stay there. But anyway, I was surprised the building was still there. So Andres Durantes had a background in the military and what have you, so he was a good choice. And then another guy, his name was Alonso Castillo from Salamanca. He was an interesting choice. Another young man, about 26 years old, that joined the group with this terrible Narvaez. I think they were really naive. They didn't know what they were getting into. And Alonso Castillo, his father was a physician in Salamanca, very well-educated man. So it's possible that Alonso probably had some background in medicine, very, very likely. He also had a background, guess what, in faith healing. And faith healing was very prominent, very, how do I say it, very active at that time, 1528 to 1526, faith healing. And so you combine all that. But then there's another guy involved, and I'm identifying just 4 people, and that's a guy by the name of Estebanico. Estebanico the Black is what he was called. Why? Because he was sub-Saharan black. He came from Azamor, Morocco, on the coast about 65 miles south of Casablanca. And his parents were probably housed and brought in as slaves. Okay, so anyway, this expedition, poor Estebanico was purchased by the father of Andres Durantes as his servant slave, okay, in Huelva. And I visited Huelva not too long ago, so it was really interesting to sort of, identify with that history. And these guys got on an expedition, went to Cuba. They got in a terrible storm, I guess it's one of the first recordings of an actual terrible hurricane in North America, Cuba, okay, or Central America. And guess what? They went to Florida to conquer Florida. And they felt rather uncomfortable because they knew that this Narvaez was a conceited, not the best guy to serve. And they had started out with 800 troops. And the poor Narvaez, he decided this is going to be real easy. Let's send some of these troops back to Panuco, which is Tampico. So then we went down to 400 troops, okay? Then where did they go? They went to Tampa, Florida. And things were kind of rough there. The situation wasn't all that good. There was a lot of swamps and what have you, and snakes and what have you. And Narvaez got all excited because they found in one village where they attacked a village or came into a village that had been not really attacked, but the Indians had fled. They found some gold. So that really got old Narvaez really excited. And so where did they go? They went north up to Pensacola, okay? And up there, they're wearing heavy armor, right, with horses and what have you. And if you fall off your horse in the swamp, sometimes you drown, and that happened. And they got attacked by Indians because Narvaez was not a very nice man. And poor Cabeza de Vaca got really concerned. He didn't like this guy, you know. He didn't know what to do. Anyway, after a while, many began to die. I don't know what it was, typhus, who knows what, but many of them died who weren't killed by Indians or drowned. And pretty soon there was about 80 or so left. That's 400 down to 80, right? And at Pensacola, they got really worried, and they decided, this is it. We have no boat, no way to get out of here. Let's go east and try to get to Tampico. So what did they do? They created rafts, and they ended up in Galveston. And poor Narvaez, he went to sea and never found him. So I don't think anyone cried so much for the loss of Narvaez. And so pretty soon, they landed in Galveston on an island called the Bad Place, Mahalo. And the Indians were kind of nice, but they didn't know who these people were. And also, they were hunters and gatherers, and these strangers became a real, how do I say it, a threat to their economy, because the strangers didn't know how to go out and get crabs, oysters, and, you know, kill rabbits, and, you know, they didn't know that. So they got tired of trying to feed these strangers. And things were kind of rough with Cabeza de Vaca and the guys, and a number of men died. Some went south on towards what they thought was Tampico, and on the way more died, and some got so hungry it was like the Donner Party. They even killed their own buddies and ate them, and that surprised the heck out of the native people. And anyway, Cabeza de Vaca, they stayed around Galveston, and then pretty soon they ended up in the San Antonio area. I got to go fast, and the Indians began to become very curious with this group. Pretty soon there was only about 16, and then pretty soon there were only 4. Imagine, 4 out of 400. And those are the 4 that I started with. And they spent 8 years in the so-called wilderness from Galveston all the way to Culiacan. But they spent most of their time over by Galveston and San Antonio and what have you. And they decided to go west. They didn't want to go south where the people ate the other comrades. So they decided to go west. And when they did that, they met Indians that were more friendly. Narvaez wasn't there and what have you. And on the way west, the Indian people wanted them. They thought they were spiritual beings, you know. They're going from west to east, so therefore they're the children of the sun. So they became known as children of the sun, and a lot of Indians demanded that they heal them. And they weren't too sure what do we do? They want us to heal them. So they, being Catholic and what have you, used spiritual healing, praying and what have you. And then in addition to that, they used some other methods, and maybe people like Cabeza de Vaca and maybe Alonso knew what he was doing, but there's also Estebanico from Morocco, and who may have had some experience with folk medicine there, okay? Anyway, they went west, and along the way, we don't know where it is, let's say between Carlsbad and El Paso, there was an Indian man who was severely, in very bad condition, been hit with an arrow, and the arrow was not really close to his heart and his cartilage. And Cabeza de Vaca didn't have much choice because the people expected him to do things to help the people. So he must have had some experience, so he performed this surgery. And I'm going to read this to you here. I think I can do it with my glasses, maybe better. Let me see. So this is the first recorded surgery, right, in North America. It's also the first recorded transcontinental walk, or crossing, let's put it that way, in North America. So anyway, he says here, he wrote this later. He didn't have a diary on the way. As a matter of fact, they lost all their clothes. The Indians stole their clothes, those Indians that weren't all that nice. And pretty soon he said, we walked as naked as we were born. Maybe they had loincloths. When my brother started working on this proposed monument, we had letters to the editor. So one woman was really upset that he was going to do nude men. So anyway, let me read the surgery here. Here he is, and he's told he has to, more or less he's expected to operate on this man who received an arrow, in a fight with another tribe, and it was deep into his, body, very close to his heart. He says, they fetched me a man, they said, had long since been shot in the shoulder through the back, and that the arrowhead had lodged above his heart. He said it was very painful and kept him sick. I probed the wound and discovered the arrowhead had passed through the cartilage. With a flint knife, I opened the fellow's chest until I could see that the point was sideways and would be difficult to extract. But I cut on, and at last, inserting my knife point deep, was able to work the arrowhead out with great effort. It was huge. With a deer bone, I further demonstrated my surgical skill with 2 stitches while blood drenched me and staunched the flow with the hair from a hide. The villagers asked me for the arrowhead, which I gave to them. The whole population came to look at it, and they sent it into the back country so the people could see it also. They celebrated this operation with their customary dances and festivities. Next day, I cut the stitches, and the patient was well. My incision appeared only like a crease in the palm of the hand. He said he felt no pain or sensitivity there at all. Now this cure so inflated our fame all over the region that we could control whatever the inhabitants cherished. We showed them the copper rattle we had recently been given, and they told us that many layers of this material were buried in the place whence it came, that this metal was highly valued, and that the people who made it lived in mixed dwellings. Now that's Pueblo Indians probably, or maybe Paquime, which is Paquime, which is also Pueblo related, in northern Chihuahua. So anyway, I'm getting to the point now, I think about time. But anyway, that's the operation. And what happened is, I think this is important to state. Cabeza de Vaca finally came out with his three buddies, comrades, at Culiacan, where Culiacan, Mexico is. And on the way, guess what? They saw an Indian wearing on his neck a buckle, which would be a Spanish belt buckle, and a nail from a horseshoe. And they knew, my gosh, there must be people nearby, like us. And there were, but unfortunately it was Nuño de Guzman who was leading slave raids in the area. So what did these 4 guys do? They stopped the slave raids, and Nuño de Guzman was put on a ship. They got support from the head of Mexico, Mendoza, and the viceroy. And that man, that slave raider, was put on a ship back to Spain in jail. Okay, but unfortunately, years later, maybe 5 or 6 years later, Cabeza de Vaca got a special assignment, and he left Spain. And guess what? He went to Rio de la Plata, which is where Asunción, Paraguay is. And I live there, which is kind of ironic. And there he saw really misuse and abuse of the native people, and he stopped it. He stopped the colonists from taking their land and the women and everything else, And when he did that, the colonists rebelled, and they put him in chains and sent him back to Spain. So he went back to Spain and made his case before the Spanish king and his court, and the king was impressed with him and said, this is the way people should be treated, the way this man did it, not the way Narvaez did it, not the way the people down there, the colonists in Rio de la Plata do it, So that was good. So he really supported the cause of humanity. So he was not only what you call a surgeon, but he was a great man. And also the same could be said about, and I can't talk about it now, is Estevanico the Black, because he also was a man who supported other people, the humanity, And here we have a slave with 3 Spaniards. Well, after a few years or maybe less in the wilderness, they became brothers, okay? No longer slave, master, okay, like that. And the viceroy in Mexico City was so impressed with Estevanico, he called him a man of reason, which is very unusual. Only only Spanish nobility is called that. And later he was killed, unfortunately, at Zuni Pueblo. And not too long ago, well, maybe about 12, 15 years ago, a 102-year-old medicine man told me why he was killed. And if you look in the books by historians, there's real racist interpretations. He's an uppity black man after women and gold and what have you. Well, he wasn't that. I mean, that's ridiculous. And guess who made the charges against him? Coronado's people. Coronado burned 5, destroyed 4 or 5 pueblos. And anyway, it's too bad that he was killed, but now people in Morocco are very interested, especially in his hometown, in having him recognized. And I think the same way is true of Cabeza de Vaca. They're really, those two are outstanding people. Thank you.